The timing couldn't be worse for Chelsea. While most clubs are using the 2026 FIFA World Cup as an opportunity to showcase their stars, Chelsea may be facing a completely different reality behind the scenes. According to multiple transfer reports, several first-team players have been linked with uncertain futures, and the biggest question isn't what they are doing for their countries, it's whether they'll return to Stamford Bridge ready to be part of Xabi Alonso's project. Imagine accepting one of the biggest jobs in world football, signing a long-term contract, and before you've even led your first training session, report begins suggesting key players could leave. That's a challenge reportedly facing Xabi Alonso this summer. The headlines have been impossible to ignore. Reports continue linking Enzo Fernandez with interest from Europe's elite clubs. Marc Cucurella has been the subject of transfer speculation. Questions remain around Nicolas Jackson's long-term role, while other members of Chelsea's squad continue to be discussed as the transfer window gathers momentum. If even some of those reports become reality, Chelsea's rebuild could look very different from the one Alonso expected when he agreed to take charge. But here's the twist. Not every transfer rumor becomes a transfer. The World Cup has a way of changing everything. One outstanding tournament can increase a player's value overnight. A poor run can cool interest just as quickly. Clubs reassess, agents negotiate, and plans that seem certain in June can look completely different by August. So what is really happening behind the scenes? Which stories are based on credible reporting, and which ones are simply transfer speculation growing louder during football's biggest tournament? In today's video, we'll break down the latest reports surrounding Chelsea's squad, examine why these players are being linked with moves away, and discuss what their futures could mean for Xabi Alonso's first season at Stamford Bridge. Because by the time the World Cup ends, Chelsea's squad could look very different, or the entire narrative could change once again. Chelsea entered the summer expecting a fresh start. After appointing Xabi Alonso as head coach, the club hoped the focus would shift toward rebuilding the squad, developing a clear identity, and returning to the top of English and European football. Instead, much of the attention has centered on transfer speculation surrounding several first-team players who are currently away representing their countries at the 2026 FIFA World Cup. The timing could hardly be more challenging. With the transfer window open and the world's biggest football tournament underway, clubs across Europe are monitoring standout performances while players and agents continue planning for the season ahead. Every impressive display increases interest, every rumor creates another headline, and every report fuels fresh debate about what Chelsea's squad could look like when preseason begins. Among the biggest names linked with uncertain futures is Enzo Fernandez. Multiple reports have suggested that some of Europe's leading clubs are monitoring his situation, making him one of the most talked-about midfielders of the summer. Whether those reports ultimately lead to a transfer remains to be seen, but they have undoubtedly placed Chelsea under an intense spotlight. Enzo isn't the only player generating discussion. Marc Cucurella has also been linked with interest from other clubs in various reports, while Nicolas Jackson's future continues to be debated after an eventful season. Moises Caicedo has likewise been the subject of transfer speculation, although reports about his long-term future have varied considerably. For Chelsea supporters, that uncertainty creates more questions than answers. How many of these stories will become reality? Which player remains central to Alonso's long-term plans? And can Chelsea build a stable project if key members of the squad continue to be linked with moves elsewhere? Those questions have dominated conversations throughout the summer. Some reports suggest Chelsea are determined to keep their core players, while others indicate that significant offers could force difficult decisions. As always during the transfer window, separating confirmed information from speculation is one of the biggest challenges. One thing is certain, Xabi Alonso's first preseason will be closely watched. Whether he begins work with the squad he expected, or one reshaped by transfers, may ultimately define the direction of Chelsea's new era. And with the World Cup still in progress, the biggest decisions may not be made until the tournament comes to an end. As the World Cup entered its decisive stages, Chelsea supporters expected the headlines to focus on their players' performances on the pitch. Instead, almost every outstanding display seemed to trigger another wave of transfer speculation. That was the first real problem facing Xabi Alonso. Before he had the opportunity to work with his squad, reports were already linking several key Chelsea players with moves elsewhere. Whether those reports ultimately prove accurate or not, they created uncertainty around a club that had hoped to begin a new chapter with stability. The biggest talking point surrounded Enzo Fernandez. Widely regarded as one of Chelsea's most influential midfielders, Fernandes has repeatedly been linked by various media outlets with interest from some of Europe's biggest clubs. Every strong performance for Argentina only intensified those conversations, with commentators questioning whether Chelsea could resist a major offer if one eventually arrived. For supporters, that created an uncomfortable dilemma. On one hand, they wanted to see Fernandes perform brilliantly on football's biggest stage. On the other, every impressive display appeared to increase speculation about his future. Then came another twist. Instead of the discussion ending with Fernandes, attention quickly shifted to the rest of Chelsea's squad. Marc Cucurella's future became another frequent topic across football media. Nicolas Jackson continued to attract interest after an inconsistent but eventful period, while Moises Caicedo was also mentioned in reports discussing Chelsea's long-term plans. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about one player. It was about the possibility of several important squad members attracting interest during the same transfer window. That changed the narrative completely. Instead of asking whether Chelsea might lose one player, fans began asking how much change the club could realistically handle before the new season. Every day seemed to bring another report. One journalist suggested Chelsea were determined to keep their core players. Another claimed certain clubs were monitoring developments closely. Others argued that much would depend on formal offers arriving after the World Cup. The uncertainty itself became the story. Meanwhile, Xabi Alonso remained in the unusual position of preparing for a season without knowing exactly which players would be available when pre-season training began. Building a tactical system is difficult enough under normal circumstances. Doing so while transfer speculation surrounds multiple first-team players presents an even greater challenge. Supporters also found themselves divided. Some believed Chelsea should reject any offers for their established stars and build around them for the future. Others argued that if extraordinary bids arrived, reinvesting that money across several positions could strengthen the squad overall. Both viewpoints had merit, but neither answered the biggest question. What did the players themselves want? Until the World Cup concluded and transfer discussions became clearer, much of the conversation remained speculative. Clubs, agents, and players typically avoid making major decisions in the middle of an international tournament, meaning supporters were left watching every match while simultaneously following every transfer update. That uncertainty became the first major twist in Chelsea's summer. The club's biggest challenge wasn't losing matches. It wasn't changing managers. It wasn't even replacing departing players. It was trying to launch a new era while questions surrounded the futures of several important members of the squad. And with the transfer window still open and the World Cup continuing to dominate football headlines, many believed the biggest decisions of Chelsea's summer had yet to be made. Just when Chelsea supporters hoped the transfer speculation had reached its peak, another reality began to emerge. The biggest challenge wasn't necessarily whether one player might leave. It was a possibility that uncertainty itself could disrupt the beginning of Xabi Alonso's project. Every day of a World Cup seemed to bring fresh reports, new rumors, and different interpretations from journalists across Europe. One outlet suggested Chelsea were determined to keep their core players. Another claimed several clubs were closely monitoring the situation. With every headline, the pressure surrounding Stamford Bridge continued to grow. That was the real turning point. Instead of discussing tactics, pre-season preparations, or potential new signings, much of the football world was talking about who might leave Chelsea before the new campaign even began. For Xabi Alonso, that created a unique challenge. Building a successful team requires stability, trust, and a clear long-term vision. But during a World Cup summer, those foundations can quickly become difficult to establish. Players are focused on representing their countries, agents are exploring opportunities, and clubs are constantly evaluating the transfer market. Meanwhile, Chelsea supporters could only watch and wait. Every strong performance from Enzo Fernandez for Argentina generated renewed discussion about his club future. Whenever Marc Cucurella, Moises Caicedo, or Nicolas Jackson appeared in transfer reports, social media immediately filled with debate. Some supporters dismissed the stories as normal transfer window speculation. Others worried that significant changes could still be ahead. The uncertainty became impossible to ignore. Yet another twist soon entered the conversation. Chelsea's position in negotiations appeared stronger than many expected. Reports suggested the club would only consider extraordinary offers for certain key players, meaning interested clubs would likely need to meet very high valuations before any serious discussions could progress. That changed the narrative once again. Instead of asking whether Chelsea wanted to sell, the bigger question became whether any club would actually meet those reported demands. As the tournament continued, one thing became increasingly clear. The World Cup wasn't just showcasing players, it was shaping the entire transfer market. Outstanding performances could increase a player's value overnight, while clubs remained cautious about making major financial commitments before the competition concluded. For Chelsea, patience suddenly became just as important as ambition. The club still had an opportunity to begin Alonso's first season with much of its core intact. Equally, the transfer window still had weeks remaining, meaning significant changes could not be ruled out. And that's what makes this story so fascinating. The biggest headlines may not have been written yet. Once the World Cup reaches a conclusion, negotiations are expected to accelerate across Europe. Chelsea will have important decisions to make. Interested clubs may formalize their interests, and Xabi Alonso will finally learn which players will be part of his first squad. Only then will the next chapter of Chelsea's rebuild truly begin. As reports surrounding Chelsea's squad continued to circulate, reactions from across the football world became increasingly divided. Supporters, journalists, and former players all viewed the situation through different lenses, creating one of the most talked-about transfer stories of the summer. On social media, Chelsea fans expressed a mixture of concern and optimism. Some argue that the club must do everything possible to keep its core players together, believing Xabi Alonso deserved the chance to begin his project with the strongest squad available. Others accepted that modern football is constantly evolving and suggested that every player has a price if the right offer arrives. Football journalists also offered contrasting viewpoints. Some reports suggested Chelsea remained confident that several of their key players would still be at Stamford Bridge when the new season begins. Other outlets continued linking certain players with Europe's biggest clubs, emphasizing that interest from elite teams is common during every major transfer window. Until official announcements are made, much of the discussion remains based on reports and ongoing speculation. Pundits focus on another important point: the timing. A World Cup summer naturally creates additional uncertainty because clubs often wait until the tournament ends before making major transfer decisions. Outstanding performances can increase a player's market value, while injuries or changing priorities may completely reshape negotiations. Many analysts also highlighted the pressure facing Xabi Alonso. Starting a new managerial role is challenging under normal circumstances, but doing so while several first-team players are regularly linked with transfers creates added complexity. Building team chemistry, planning tactical systems, and preparing for preseason all become more difficult when the final squad is still uncertain. Despite the speculation, there was also a sense of cautious optimism. Chelsea still possess a talented group of players, promising young prospects, and the resources to strengthen the squad if necessary. Many observers believe the club's success will depend less on transfer rumors and more on how effectively Alonso establishes a clear identity once preseason begins. For now, the football world continues to watch closely. Every World Cup match, every transfer report, and every official statement has a potential to change the narrative. Until the transfer window closes, Chelsea's summer remains one of the biggest stories in European football, and supporters everywhere will be waiting to see how the next chapter unfolds. As the World Cup moves toward a conclusion, Chelsea find themselves standing at a crossroads. For weeks, transfer speculation has dominated the headlines. Reports have linked several players with moves away from Stamford Bridge, while Chelsea have repeatedly been described as preparing for an important summer under Xabi Alonso. Yet despite all the discussion, one crucial fact remains unchanged. Nothing has been decided until official agreements are signed. That may be the biggest twist of all. The football world has spent weeks debating who could leave, who might stay, and what Chelsea's squad will eventually look like. But transfer windows are unpredictable. Deals that appear closed can suddenly collapse, while completely unexpected moves can emerge within hours. For Alonso, patience may prove just as important as tactics. Once the World Cup ends, players will return to their clubs, transfer negotiations are expected to accelerate, and Chelsea will finally have a clearer picture of the squad available for the new season. Only then can Alonso fully begin shaping his vision for the club. The coming weeks could define Chelsea's future. Will the club successfully convince its key players to stay and build around a new project? Will major offers arrive that force difficult decisions? Or will Chelsea surprise everyone by strengthening the squad instead of losing it? Right now, nobody outside the club knows the answers. One announcement could change the entire story overnight. One completed transfer could reshape Chelsea's plans. Or one player choosing to stay could become the biggest signing of the summer without Chelsea spending a single pound. That's why the story is far from over. The World Cup may be approaching its final stages, but Chelsea's biggest decisions could still be ahead. Until the transfer window officially closes, every report, every rumor, and every official update has a potential to rewrite the narrative. And when Xabi Alonso finally walks onto the training pitch with his squad assembled, only then will football fans discover whether this summer was the beginning of Chelsea's revival, or just the start of an even bigger rebuild. If you've made it this far, then you know one thing for sure. Chelsea's summer is shaping up to be one of the most dramatic transfer windows in recent years. Now we want to hear your opinion. Do you think Enzo Fernandez will still be a Chelsea player when the season begins? Was selling Marc Cucurella the right decision if the reports are accurate? And should Xabi Alonso build around players like Moises Caicedo and Reece James as a core of his new project? Drop your predictions in the comments below because this story is far from over, and the transfer window could change everything in a matter of days. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more Chelsea news, transfer updates, and football documentaries throughout the summer. We'll be covering every major development as it happens, from World Cup performances to official transfer announcements. Also, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next update, because the moment one of these deals becomes official, the entire narrative around Chelsea and Xabi Alonso could change overnight. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video as Chelsea's rebuild continues to unfold.